reading is actually a linguistic gymnastics. Have the same child that was just in a diaper, we are insisting they grasp a level of reading. Speaking is natural, reading isn't. I'm in a Facebook group of mothers, and a mother asked a very interesting question. She wanted to know at what age should her child, who was still in preschool, learn to read. The child had not yet started primary school, so the child was at least 4 years old, if not 3. The responses were very interesting. They ranged all the way from a preschool teacher who said, doesn't need to know how to read, preschool is just foundational, learning begins at primary school, to some parents saying, they assess children entering primary school, your child should be able to read while in preschool. So the question is very important to parents. The question is, how long does it take a child to learn to read, or should it take a child to learn to read? Here are 5 points that speak to that answer. Number 1, children learn at different rates. We all do. That's how the human mind works. So it's no different with children. Hopalong had done a project over a number of years in 20 primary schools in Trinidad. And it was interesting that when we assessed the students, we worked with first year, second year, standard 1 students. So we're talking 4+-year-olds to about 7+-year-olds. And we assessed each child at the beginning of their class level. Some data here of the second year infant children was very interesting. When we assessed the second years who were at the beginning of second year infants, the range of reading abilities was quite varied. We had 28% of 5 to 6-year-olds who were now at the very beginning stage of learning to read, now starting to connect letters with sounds and identifying words, sight words. So these children were just at the beginning stage, even though they had spent a year in primary school, 28%, whereas 12% in that same group of children of 5 to 6-year-olds were fluent readers, were functional readers, and could read a newspaper in the same class level. So the variety of learning rates and abilities speaks to the fact that not everyone can learn to read as early as others. Point 2 is that reading is actually not natural. Speaking is natural, reading isn't. One example that makes us know that for sure is the fact that not all cultures throughout history have had a written language. Oral, all cultures have oral, so speaking is natural. And yet still we give children time to learn how to speak. So if reading is not natural but man-made, taking those images, turning them to hieroglyphics and written symbols and letters, if that's man-made, then we have to give children time to learn how to read it. Now, it might seem natural when we see a 3-year-old who it just clicks with, and that's because their brain connected the dots just that much faster. But that's not necessarily a common thing if they're not guided. So therefore, if it's not a natural thing, then we have to allow children the years they need to grasp it. Point 3 is, as one writing said, reading is actually a linguistic gymnastics. Have you ever thought about how many different skills we need to be able to accomplish or grasp in order to be a reader? Think of it, and these are just some of the skills. We need to be able to connect sounds to symbols, aka the letters. We need to be able to blend them into words. We need to be able to identify sight words, those what people like to call tricky words, words that are not purely sound. Well, that's just one definition of sight words. We have to be able to have enough vocabulary in our own mind to be able to grasp what we're reading. We need to understand context clues. We need to understand grammatical, the grammar skills of that language. We have to innately, because we don't sit down and go through a set of rules, but we have to mentally, the child, grasp the grammatical structures of their language. And the child, even we and the children, have to be able to connect reading to our own personal experiences. So what we're reading makes sense. And that's just some of the skills we need in order to read. So since it's such a linguistic gymnastics, we have to allow children time to reach that point. We need to guide them. Of course, the more we guide them with the right strategies, the faster they'll learn. But the reality is, they need the time in order to learn. Point 3 is one of the reasons this is even a question is because the anxiety that is put on parents, the anxiety by schools, by teachers. Remember, one of the responses in the Facebook group was, your child needs to learn in preschool how to read because the primary school is going to assess them. So the fact that schools even do assessments of that nature, some schools, not all, before even taking in students, gets parents anxious. So we're talking about parents who often send their children to preschool, in Trinidad and Tobago at least, from the age of 3 for 2 years. And at the same time, they've just been potty trained. So if you think about it, they've just been potty trained. We're now making sure they can read all before they start primary school. And in some cases, children start primary school at the age of 4, not yet 5. So the same child that was just in a diaper, we are insisting they grasp a level of reading when they're still babies. But it's the anxiety put on parents by certain school systems, certain schools. So that is even why it has become such an issue. We're worried for our children, it's natural. In an upcoming video, in the next video, I'm going to discuss actually the point, reasons why it matters to allow children time to learn how to read, why it's such an important thing to understand. Then we've got a 5th one. In our minds, if our child has not yet learned how to read, then will they ever catch up? Will they always forever be behind the child that learned how to read in preschool? The answer is no. Your child will not be left behind, all things being equal. What studies have shown is that even children who are deemed remedial, young children, if given the right teaching instruction, 90% of them actually catch up with their fellow students who learned a couple years before them. So a child who's 6 and can't yet read, it doesn't mean your child is a special needs child and there's something wrong with my child. Not necessarily at all. Of course, there are many other factors, but the anxiety is not necessary. A group of friends, we were workmates, friends, we were chatting, and the topic of, and we were all in education, the topic of when did you learn to read came up. None of us could quite remember, but on average, we were saying around 6, 7, I learned to read. One in the group said, I learned to read at the age of 3. And we were like, wow. Keep in mind, we were all in the same profession, same skill level in our profession. And then she said, but you want to hear the joke? I didn't understand a thing I was reading. I was word calling. So basically, to her, she learned she learned the functional way to read. She learned the mechanics, is what I want to say, the mechanics of reading. But that was it. Her brain didn't quite click with what she was reading for another couple of years. So it is possible for a child who's 3 who can read, still not, for a child who's 5 who's now getting into it, for them to balance off as they go along in school. So it can happen. Let me ask you this one. If I told you that there was a famous author, children's author in the United States, became world-renowned, and she went to Berkeley University, became an expert in writing stories, wrote stories for decades, won over 35 national awards. What age would you say she learned how to read? And she also had been a librarian. Would you say she learned to read? Oh, surely, if she was so good with language, she learned to read at the age of 4, 5, maybe 6. Actually, this person was Beverly Cleary. She wrote the series Ramona series and other popular children's books. She said reading didn't click with her. It only began to come together, gel together at the age of 7. And only by grade 2 in the US, around the age of 8, then she got into the flow of reading. So that speaks to the fact that just because a child might not yet learn to read as fast as their classmate, it doesn't mean the child has a learning problem, nor does it mean your child will never catch up. So we really shouldn't be as anxious as we are. But I do understand the anxiety. As I said, the next video will discuss that. So long and short of it, how long should it take a child to learn how to read? It varies. On average, and no child is an average child, but mathematically, on average, it should take the first 3 years of primary school. So first year, second year, standard 1. So by the time they're 7 plus, we usually expect the child to have some level of reading functionality. If after that there's still a problem, then we really need to put other factors into place. But the reality, even into standard 1, teachers should be teaching reading to students who need it, because some children come to standard 1 functionally literate. So it varies. Give children the time they need, and we have to use the strategies that work well for them. See you next time.